Welcome to the 23rd episode of the Student Recap Podcast, Party Politics 4, Trump Talk. Now, I have Benjamin back here with me again. I know it's been a while, but to start off, we're just going to talk about the 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum coming into the U.S. So would you like to start, Ben?
Okay, so I believe the argument for why Trump is placing the 25% tariffs is because China exports steel and aluminum to Mexico and China, where they are then imported into the U.S. And the goal of the 25% tariffs is to tariff Chinese manufacturing companies that are trying to avoid the China tariffs.
And in addition to this also correlates to American steel and the failed buyout. Because obviously steel is a very important component of many products, such as cars or planes, which we'll talk about later. But steel is just a very important thing, and he's trying to bolster domestic production, even though we don't have the scale.
So Trump is also trying to use the national security loophole in the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, which is a trade agreement between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada that was signed and ratified as of 2020.
Now, so in addition to this, there's the 25% total tariff on Chinese goods, 25% tariff that will eventually come back for Mexico and Canada. So what do you think?
I thought it's 20% to Mexico and Canada, is it not?
It's somewhere around that number. We'll have to fact check that. But basically, it's just a bargaining chip because even though Trump hasn't bargained with China, he already made deals with the president of Mexico and with Justin Trudeau, the prime minister of Canada. And every time I think he's just going to extend the temporary agreements. I don't ever think that these are actually going to be in place as an effective method of making American economies stronger. Because anyways, he's already funding a bunch of American economies with, for example, I believe it's like Star Network with AI investment with all the data centers that he's building with a $500 billion investment, which they haven't gotten yet. I think SoftBank was a big investor, but Elon Musk has even said that they don't have the money yet.
Okay, so I think the goal of the tariffs is so that the U.S. government can earn some money to lower the U.S. federal debt. Mm-hmm. And if tariffs didn't work and didn't harm the manufacturers, then we wouldn't be getting tariffed back by China, Mexico, and Canada.
And in addition to this, there are a few kind of shady things that have been happening. Not shady as in backdoor negotiating, but just kind of not legal. So the creation of DOGE, Benjamin was telling me that it's partially unconstitutional.
Well, the way Trump went about making DOGE is he took a pre-existing agency and he completely revamped it into DOGE.
And also,
he's also withholding congressionally approved funding to certain programs and agencies.
Yeah, so the approval of money to be used within the federal government has to be approved by Congress. Therefore, by just doing an executive order, it's not actually fully legal because it needs to be vetted by the houses. And in addition to this, there were many speculations over whether Elon Musk getting all these security clearances was correct because he's only it's quote like special government employee. He doesn't actually have the full rights that what a government employee would have.
Yeah, so Trump went around the bodies that he's supposed to go through in order to give several federal employees their security clearances, Elon Musk included.
And so, more on Elon Musk. So, there's a bit of clash of interest because obviously Elon Musk, he communicates with Chinese companies that may or may not be state-owned. I do not know the specifics. even if it's not strictly about the business of Tesla and like getting the parts for his cars or parts for SpaceX, there's still some spying that could be going on from the Chinese side onto Tesla's side.
Well, so as for SpaceX, they can't legally like give China anything because that would violate the International Trade in Arms Regulation, ITAR, which basically states that no U.S. companies can give foreign countries any information on how to build rockets.
Oh, okay. So there's like a space technology thing.
As for Tesla, manufacturing in China is cheaper than in the U.S.
Yeah.
So there's that. But I'm pretty sure that most of the electronical components that could potentially be used for spying are made in the U.S., Mexico, or Canada, or Taiwan, as per Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company.
And this goes back to, one, the tariffs, because China has lower production costs there than if Tesla were to produce all their cars in the U.S. But also it connects to what I'm speculating is kind of a Cold War between China and the U.S. in terms of technology, because obviously with DeepSeek coming out, it's a brand new Chinese AI model that was exorbitantly less costly than, let's say, ChatGPT, because basically what it does is, instead of knowing everything in the world that it needs to know, it knows every single source in the world. So that's drastically less information that it needs to have already in its database. Therefore, there's less computing power needed. And obviously, with China not being able to get the most advanced chips due to restrictions, they needed to do this. And I would like to also add that the Chinese engineers, they probably found like the loopholes out on how to make AI better because they were so strained in budget and also things that they could use.
Yeah, the U.S. has banned the export of NVIDIA's most advanced chips and processors to China for the specific purpose of preventing them from developing a super intelligent AI. And it appears that China just figured out how to make do without them. As for a second Cold War, but with China this time, I fully agree, because in a military aspect, China is trying to compete with the U.S.'s stealth superiority, along with China and the U.S. are both racing to the moon by 2030.
So, more on the thing of the tech war. So it really is super widespread, because there has been evidence of Chinese companies spying and sometimes infringing copyright on American companies for a variety of things, such as solar power technologies, even paint companies, some energy companies. So it really is like what the US and the USSR had, but there haven't been any proxy conflicts yet. At least not what we would see as clear proxy conflicts.
I guess, but there's still also, like, kind of the war in Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, the closest thing I would actually say would be Chinese Coast Guard vessels,
And the Philippines.
and the Philippines, due to the Philippines being a U.S. ally, and there being some tension there. But we don't need to go into that right now. Now, to discuss more about some controversial things that Trump did, USAID has essentially been defunded, but then it was kind of reverted by a U.S. judge blocking the executive order trying to dismantle USAID. Would you like to talk about that, Ben?
So USAID is a government program aimed at basically
Developing
third world countries and giving vaccines to poorer countries that don't have the money to research and produce vaccines for malaria and HIV and others. So USAID also gives food to, like,
African nations that are in famine.
Yeah, if we shut down USAID, China is just going to step in, charge them significantly less, but then also tell them, you're in debt to us now, let us build, like, military bases there in order to, like, make up the deficit or something.
Yeah.
And then that would just give China an even bigger foothold in Africa.
So basically, USAID, it's kind of just a subsection of the State Department. Now Marco Rubio, he kind of assumed control of it. But the problem with this is that without the U.S.'s soft power influence around the world, China is going to grow drastically in their influence, as they already have been with the Belt and Road Initiative. And I think this was just a dumb move, because I think even Trump knows that this is going to decrease the bargaining power that the U.S. has to other nations, since we aren't giving aid to them.
It would also increase U.S. isolationism and basically reduce the world's faith in the U.S. as the reigning world superpower.
And basically, this isolationism, much like in the early 20th century, like President McKinley, that Trump has compared himself to, it really leads to conflict. Because even though there was U.S. Times of prosper and economic boom, there's going to be something in the end that's going to be negative for the U.S., whether that be the U.S. economy faltering due to other nations not putting as much investment into the U.S., or whether it be a conflict, either wide scale or small scale, such as a proxy war.
I believe China has to invade Taiwan by 2028, or they will face severe population decline because of their previous one-child policy.
Yeah. So the one-child policy, it actually hasn't. It has negatively affected China, because even though they removed it, the population isn't growing at a big enough rate in order for them to maintain a growing population that would be larger than other developing nations. Now, more domestically, we'd like to talk about the FAA, the Federal Aviation Agency.
Yeah, but before that, on behalf of the Student Recap Podcast, our condolences go out to the families of Captain Jonathan Campos, First Officer Sam Liley, Flight Attendants Ian Epstein and Denicia Brown, Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara, Chief Warrant Officer 2nd Andrew Lloyd Eves, Captain Rebecca Loback, the more than a dozen figure skaters and their coaches, along with the countless others who died in the crash.
Now,
outside of DCA, an American Eagle flight crashed into a Black Hawk helicopter, killing a total of 67 people, marking the most tragic accident and most severe aviation accident in the United States since 2009.
Now, the FAA has had some severe budget cuts recently, and also in the past there have not been as many air traffic controllers being filled up in terms of positions. Basically, there's a crisis right now that airline safety is being hindered due to the fact that there's not enough air traffic controllers. Now, there have been many close calls, including a Delta and Japan Airlines. They hit wings in the Seattle airport, I believe.
So as for the DCA incident at Ronald Reagan National Airport, the flight corridors between the runway 33 landing approach and the helicopter corridor, the distance in elevation for the recommended is 15 feet. Yeah. Now, in the aviation world, 100 feet is considered extremely close.
Yes. Yeah, I was about to say that they're overlapping. So literally, if the helicopter was at the same altitude as the plane, which it clearly was, they would interfere. And this caused the crash. Now there's also...
Well, okay. So as for DCA, there was one flight controller in the tower for that load of traffic. There would normally be two.
Yeah. And I was about to say that there's questions of whether the Black Hawk helicopter was fully aware. I believe that they did not respond to the air traffic controller's message, and I think that if the plane and the Black Hawk helicopter had been more in communication, they would have averted the disaster.
Yeah, so they were on different radio channels, but also the tower told the Black Hawk to be aware of an aircraft and keep visual on it. Mm-hmm. But it's possible that they were looking at a different aircraft that was on the ground about to take off and not the aircraft coming in to land. Another issue with the runway 33 approach is it's used to divert smaller flights in times when there's large amounts of traffic landing or taking off at DCA. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to be in any of the flight plans. So it's not an expected. It's not expected traffic in the Blackhawks flight plans.
I see. Now, in the future, would you expect there to be more aviation accidents due to government-wide budget cuts, or will it just stay at previous levels?
So aviation is still the safest transportation method. As for the budget cuts, it takes 2 years to train a flight controller. This is not a result of Trump's pause on hiring federal employees. This is a long-standing issue where there is a significantly lower amount of flight controllers than necessary to run things smoothly at airports.
So it's the terms of whether people really want to go into the sector, and since they haven't been wanting to, and it takes so long to become a flight traffic controller, there's a deficit, much like the military doesn't have enough recruits.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the 23rd episode of the Student Recap Podcast. We'll see you guys next week.